Welcome back to Fast Market here on the TD Ameritrade Network. I'm Tom White, joined by my co-host Kevin Hinks. But let's bring in our next guest for our hashtag segment. That's going to be Megan Brantley, Vice President of Research at LikeFolio. Welcome back to the show, Megan.
Thanks, guys.
So we're talking about another tech loser this year with Meta Platforms down about 66% so far this year. This thing has just gotten beaten down. They're spending too much on the metaverse. It's not, making them any money at this point, but they still have, monthly active users on their platforms. They're over 2 billion. What kind of data do you guys have out of LikeFolio, Megan?
Yeah, so whenever we look at Meta, as you mentioned, this is a monster. They've got billions of users on one of the platforms, be it Facebook, be it WhatsApp, be it Instagram. And when we look at those mentions of consumers who are talking about downloading or using one of those social platforms, those are actually starting to trend up on a year-over-year and quarter-over-quarter basis. We saw a little bit of tempering in 2021 as things kind of normalized post-pandemic heights, and now we're starting to see that tick up again. So, this is really led by strength in Reels. We see really significant adoption there, which is across its Facebook and its Instagram platform. Those mentions are up by about 64% year over year. And we also see strength on its Instagram platform, specifically related to shoppable content. So consumer mentions of finding a product for purchase on Instagram have risen by about 41% year over year, which is a really good sign for that conversion rate if you're Meta. And just overall, we see a large consumer shift and preference for whenever people are shopping online, they like to discover brands and products organically. So these mentions of people finding some type of brand or product to purchase on any social media platform is at all-time highs this holiday season, up by about 45% year over year. So that's right in line with what we're seeing with Instagram. So I think those are kind of the positives that we can hit on from Meta moving forward. But I think the negative, a lot of that has to do with just macroeconomic headwinds. We know that ad spend is down, and this really is impacting Meta. When advertisers spend less, this is Facebook's bread and butter. And so while they could be good at conversions, if advertisers aren't spending, that's not good for the company. And then also, as you mentioned, Meta is really being drugged down by its Reality Labs segment. And where we have visibility into this is in its Oculus device, so this VR headset that it has. And we saw last Christmas, it had a really nice holiday season. Mentions really spiked. The metaverse was buzzing. But now we see it really flat and kind of dropping off. There's no significant buzz leading into this holiday season. I think that, overall, its Reality Labs segment posted a loss of over $9 billion just this year alone so far as of its last quarter. And so this is something that we don't necessarily see improvements here. I don't think that Meta has alluded to any improvements here. I think it expects these losses to continue through 2023. So, on the positive side, we do see some tractions, at least in regard to consumers using its social platforms and adopting its TikTok copycat reel and, shopping on Instagram. However, those headwinds in terms of, ad spend being down and really that lack of return on investment in the metaverse so far is really holding the company back.
Megan, these are a lot of complex problems and a lot of red flags going on right now with Meta. But there's ways to fix these, right? First, come out, Mark Zuckerberg, put your tail between your legs and say, we're going to adjust spending on the metaverse, right? We're going to do what needs to be responsible to make sure that shareholder value is first and foremost. Number two, do what Elon Musk did. When he had a problem with Apple and Tim Cook, he got on a plane and flew to Cupertino and worked it out. This iOS change for that changes the way they track and measure ads is a big problem for Meta. Go out there and figure it out. Those things right there, just those two things. And you're right, they've spent $9.4 billion is the loss so far in the metaverse. But all that being said, all those red flags, everything together, Megan, the stock still has an 11 PE, and they've gone way too far in the price of this. Can it go further? Yes, it can, and it probably will if the overall market's weak. But can't some of these problems, though complex, be fixed, Megan?
Yeah, I definitely think that they can. And I think that this is one of those companies, when we look at okay, when the economy does start doing better, whenever we see that return in ad spend, this is going to be one of the key beneficiaries here, because we see that it's got so many, I mean, you're talking over 3 billion engaged users across its platform that potentially could be monetized and connected with. That's an enormous opportunity, and we do see it doing well, and especially improving in terms of connecting with consumers on Instagram specifically. So we do think that this is one of those big beneficiaries when we do see this return in ad spend. So I think that that's something positive that Meta has going for it. We do also see kind of a slowdown in terms of tempering in the loss of users in terms of Facebook. You know, I know that this has been a platform that's kind of struggled in the past. In the past couple of quarters, Meta has been able to really hit on that Instagram strength, and we're starting to see signs that, Facebook is even doing better. That a metric that we really look at are returning users, especially here in the U.S., and we're starting to see that returning user rate improve. So I think that long term, Meta is really well positioned, at least in its core business model in terms of these social platforms moving forward. We like to see those engagement rates up and rising. That starts to be a classic even divergence opportunity for us. But, it's important to note that in the meantime, though, at least in the other side of its business, that Reality Labs, that's still something that investors don't necessarily like, and that we don't see any signs of improvement on, at least in the near term. But long term, I think that you could definitely make a case for Meta, especially as it's related to its positioning in the social space.
Yeah, and I was looking at the consumer purchase intent mentions chart, where stock price is far below some of the data that you guys have for Meta platforms. Some analysts have come out recently and said, hey, this is their stock, their rebound stock for 2023. But Megan, think about this. If TikTok gets banned in the U.S., which I'll be raising my hand that it should be, if it does that mean additional users and better ad spend and better monetization for Meta platforms moving forward on Reels, the competitor to TikTok?
Yeah, I think Reels is really doing a good job, at least copying TikTok's model. We do see a lot of engagement there. And I think that this is kind of a natural transition, if something like that were to happen with TikTok, which is still speculative, that this would be a place where consumers would turn, and this would definitely be a place where advertisers would turn, because I know that TikTok has soaked up a lot of the advertising dollars, that competition, and that's not helping Meta's case when it comes to just overall lowered ad spend. But, at least when we look at our data across the board, so everything that we're tracking, at least on the consumer side of things, we are starting to see some positive momentum. If we were to place an earnings score on this, and, earnings aren't until January, we're starting to see a more bullish spin. Our score is actually about a 42, which for us is pretty high, but it doesn't take into effect some of these macro headwinds. So I think it's important for investors to temper that, to acknowledge, weakness in its Reality Labs segment and just weakness in ad spend overall. But for us, long term, we definitely see some opportunities developing.
All right, great stuff. Great data as usual, Megan. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. You too.
All right, that's Megan Brantley, Vice President of Research at LikeFolio. Kev,